Hello. Hi. I know I said that I would post more, but I could not figure out a platform that I thought was sufficient for me. I watched a lot of videos, different tarot readers, psychics, mediums, you know, people forewarning you of the future, things like that. And I was like, nah. I mean, I'm interested, but it's not me. So it's all part of me, but that's not me. So I'm just gonna talk about me. So if you enjoy this channel, it's because you enjoy me, not for any other reason. I'm not trying to predict your future. I'm not trying to say anything that is going to be beneficial to you, but to just talk about me. And if it benefits you, then that's fine. Today I want to talk about Essure. Essure is a sterilization product that was put out, and in 2008 and 2009 I had the procedure. It was referred to me by my gynecologist at the time because I asked her about getting a tube ligation. I was divorced, had my 5th kid, and I decided I no longer wanted to have children. I do have a pre-existing clotting disorder and was told that because of the clotting disorder, it was best to get Essure. It was an alternate option. It was less invasive. I had no surgery, so I didn't have to worry about bleeding. I'd be in, I'd be out, I'd be done. I made the appointment. I went in 2008. I had it done. My left fallopian tube started to spasm, so I had to reschedule an appointment, and I went back in 2009 to get that done. 2009, I did a follow-up and got the contrast dye to make sure that it was all in place. I was told I was good to go. There was no worry. It was the safest thing for me because I did have this bleeding disorder, and the last thing I needed was to have something surgically done to me. I accepted that. I lived my life. I enjoyed my kids. All my children at the time were underage, so I had a house full of kids all the time. Not just my own children, but I spent summers with sometimes up to 15 kids living in my house. We would do things, go places, test different foods or cultural events, travel, just go to different things throughout the time that they spent with me. It was nice. I felt like I was doing something to help others because, their parents weren't always available to or able to. So that was my life. I was in school full-time for psychology. When I was younger, I decided I wanted to be a brain surgeon and that I would help people figure out what was in their heads. When I graduated high school, I became a barber. And it was easier to cut hair and learn people than it was to go to medical school. So that was my choice. I enjoyed that for years. And while I was doing that, I went to school to be a sign language interpreter. I didn't complete it because I decided midway through that I did not want to interpret other people's words. If I could speak to help someone, I'd rather it be my words that I spoke. I ended up in 2011, I started passing out. I don't know why, but I would pass out. And I would pass out to the point that I would fall over and could not move. I could see. If my eyes were open, I could hear. I just could not move. This continued to happen into 2011, and I did not know why. My body started just feeling excruciating pain. My skin would burn if someone touched it, if the wind touched it, if the sun touched it. It just always hurt. Kind of started getting really, sheltered within myself. My knees, my back, my face, my neck, my head, had chronic migraines to the point that a migraine could get to a 10 where I felt like my head was going to explode, and at best it would be a 7 where it just hurt, and no one could explain. started to have muscle fatigue. I started to um, just be really weak and not be able to do much. I started to see a doctor in 2011, April, and she told me to file for a disability. She said, file for a disability, and one of two things are going to happen. Either we're going to figure out what's wrong with you and we're going to fix it, or we're going to figure out what's wrong with you and you at least have help with dealing with it. I did that. I did as she instructed. She later retired that year, so I was left without her, without knowing the professional aspect of what was going on to me. I did follow up with different rheumatologists, and I saw a neurologist and my hematologist, allergists, all these people, ENTs, regular doctors. I saw all of them, and they concluded that I had asthma that was severe now, that I was diagnosed with Chiari malformation, and that's where your brain has a swelling, and it usually pinches off at the skull, and they were saying that that was most likely why I was passing out, because the passing out was, the swelling would be pinched off by the brain, by the skull. I would fall out, and my body couldn't move because it was stopping the motion, the motor part of my body. So that's why I couldn't move, but I could still hear and see. This happened a few times. And one time, my daughter, my younger of the two, she had to drag me, and as she dragged me, I started to feel. There were a couple times that I was like alone, and it would happen, and I'd just lay on the couch, and then all of a sudden I'd start shaking. Well, the thing was that the shaking was me getting blood back to those areas, so my body would convulse almost because it was starting to feel again. Well, this continued to happen. I continued to see specialists. They would diagnose me with, symptoms, but never a full diagnosis of why those symptoms were happening. Then there was, so then I saw a neurologist. He would give me the cranial nerve blocks, kind of shooting a needle up in the back of your skull, and he just kind of massaged my brain back up in my head and said that that would help. It would be something I would probably have to get for the rest of my life, but temporarily it would help. I started having prior, I had an accident at work where I got caught prior to even getting Essure, I had an accident where I got caught in a wheelchair lift while pushing a client on, because I used to drive the paratransit bus, and I was pushing a client on, and the controller slipped between me and the bus, and it closed in on me, so I was kind of stuck in there. But safety first, I had to make sure the client was safe. When that happened, my hip was displaced, and I had lower back pain because my body was twisted in such an odd way. So I had to go through a year of physical therapy, but I was okay from that. That did not trigger the severity that I had in 2011. And just out of nowhere, everything just started going downhill. I got to a point where I was having heart problems, like my heart was racing. They didn't know if it was part of why I was passing out. My enzymes were off, my liver, my kidneys. I just had a lot of issues that were happening all at once and could not find out why. I was diagnosed with symptoms, but never a diagnosis of what was wrong and what was causing it. I then accepted my fate that I was going to just completely go downhill and probably would have died, because all I was being told was that's part of getting old. Well, part of getting old in your 30s doesn't make sense. That when I know people in their 70s, 80s, 90s who were more mobile, functioning, and healthier than I was as far as that goes. As far as health goes, for myself personally, I am overall very healthy. I eat organic. I don't eat growth hormones. I stay away from as much as possible in foods. I eat lots of vegetables. I drink lots of water, fluids. I don't I'm not a soda person. Um, I used to be a casual drinker where I drink here or there with a friend, but never where I was like killing bottles or, I was not alcoholic or anything like that. As soon as I found out that things like my liver were being affected, I stopped completely. Um, I did, however, move to West Virginia. I had doctors always giving a prescription. Just give a prescription, we'll mask it, you'll accept it, and it'll hide the issue. Well, the issue was I still had to live. I still had children. I did not need my symptoms masked. I needed my symptoms healed. And with not getting answers, I began to get stressed. Um, have had depression since my mom passed in 2014, but it was never severe. It was just a sadness, it was not just a regular sadness. It was an extreme, it was depression because I felt alone in this world because I didn't have my mother. Um, it was hard to function, but I made do. I made do. Well, when I moved to West Virginia, I got pain doctors and all this, and they give prescriptions. I started to see a psychologist. He referred me to a psychiatrist. I let him try me on different medicines, and the medicines didn't work. I had medicines that made me feel like I was sitting inside my body as if it was a shell. I had medicines that made me see images of myself shooting myself in the head. I had medicines that made me feel like I just needed to sleep all the time. I had medicines that made me less coherent than I already was. None of those medicines worked, and I decided medicines aren't what my issue is. It's I have to deal with the life that I have, and that's where the problem is. I do not need medications to numb me from my life because my life is still there. And this wasn't just everyday life issues. These were serious and severe. And the pain medicines, it was like I told the doctors, give me as minimal as possible because I don't want to be someone who has to rely on heavy medications. I did that. Did that for a couple years. And while seeing my psychologist and just talking my way through, and just in one conversation, I said to him, I am grateful that I have Essure, because had I not had that, I don't know what I would have done if I got pregnant while being sick. And my my therapist, Mr. Michael Morielli, said to me, what did you just say? And I said, if I didn't have that in me. And he said, let's recap. When did you get that in you? And I said, before I got sick. My aha moment. My moment of clarity. And he said, start looking into that. Because there were never any answers prior to that. I did. I started looking. I got on the internet. I looked, for side effects that may not be just gynecological. It wasn't just the heavy periods. It wasn't just the cramping for weeks at a time. It was the physical things that were happening in my body practically attacking itself, shutting down. I got to a point where I was losing hair. I would clench my jaws. I was diagnosed with TMJ. I would clench my jaws so hard that I would break my molars. I was losing teeth without rot. And so I looked into this to find out that it wasn't just me. There were others. There were thousands of others. And when I found them, I found their symptom list and the doctors that were on board saying yes, they had treated people and this, there were reversals and things like that. I started going to, I went to my gynecologist after that and I told her what was going on. She started having tests run. Her name was Dr. Harms. She started running tests and had my neurologist and my hematologist, allergist, had them all on board, running tests and things like that. Found out that Essure was made of nickel titanium wrapped in PET fibers. PET fibers, PET, PET fibers, are the same chemical compound of water bottles that they tell you not to leave in your car hot. This was in my body, hot. And that was 2015 when I found out. Nearly 7 years after I had this in my body. So if you can't have a water bottle in your car for a couple hours, otherwise it leaks toxins, what do you think that did in my body for 7 years? I was allergic to nickel. I was tested. I had never been tested prior. I found out I'm allergic to contrast dyes, which was a follow-up to make sure they were in place. I have a mercury allergy. I eventually knew that, but that also even came about afterwards because I love salmon, and every time I'd eat like salmon or some type of fish, I would have to take Benadryl just to alleviate the like my skin. It would almost itch and swell. But I loved it. Like I said, I eat healthy overall. And so I found these things out, and I started to get my blood done because that was enough to remove. Finding those things out was enough to remove it. In addition to having, I would spend at least half of a month, if not 3 weeks, having a period, or it would lighten and come back, and so the majority of a month I was having a period or some type of bleeding. I had the clotting disorder, which made that even scarier, and then I would cramp severely. So when I saw my hematologist after he ran a series of tests for a few weeks, and he said to me, I will not give you clearance for surgery. And I said, why would you not give me clearance for surgery? And he said, because I will not be responsible for you dying. And I said, I'll die anyhow. He said, but it won't be because of me. I can't, with clear conscience, give you clearance to have the surgery. So there I was left with a dilemma, major breakdown, because what do I do now? He did eventually refer me to the medical college in Morgantown, West Virginia, and I spent about 6 months driving back and forth. My daughter actually drove me back and forth twice a week for nearly 6 months to get my blood tested, to not get clearance, but to get precautionary methods to hopefully avoid any complications. If something were to come up, there would be platelets on, I would have coagulants and things like that. I finally was scheduled for my surgery April of 2016, 5 years after I lost my job and had to live without. In that time, I dealt with trying to get public assistance, being humiliated, talked to like I was just trash, dealing with doctors thinking that I was, just seeking pills or, just as if I was crazy. And it all came down to a moment in my therapist's office that led to me actually finding help. And it took my gynecologist believing me when I said it, and her not treating me like others had to get the proper channels open so I could get that surgery. I got that surgery in 2016. Nearly immediately after, I did go a week after I woke up in a pool of blood, and it was most likely because with the clotting disorder, and the sutures hadn't healed, and so I was bleeding, so I had it cauterized. I went from that point on. I progressively have gotten better. The bleeding stopped. I healed. I've been able to talk, walk. I've been able to function. You know, I continued to apply for disability, went through a couple of lawyers and finally I was told that because I was not 50 yet, and as long as there was something that existed in this world that I could do, they would not approve me. I was told this. So I accepted it. So I had to figure out what could I do. I moved back to Wisconsin with my kids, and two of them grown by then. I moved back to Wisconsin, and when I did, I found a job, like by the grace of the divine. I found a job at a nature center. I work at that nature center now, minimum 3 days a week. It's a part-time job, but I still have never been approved for any monetary assistance. I've gotten, assistance, just never money, because they always expect more than I've been capable of, so I've never had it, and yet still been humiliated for asking for help. Been humiliated by doctors. I, just a couple weeks ago, went to what was my doctor, a holistic doctor that I found when I moved up here. I went to her, and I wasn't the glitz and glamour, because like I said, I lost hair, I lost teeth, so so I went without, just the eye makeup or a wig, and I just had a hair wrap on. And I went, and I had got like sinus irritation, and I was like, my sinuses are irritated, it's going into my ear. And she started talking to me as if I was like drug seeking. Well, what do you want me to give you? Well, you're the professional, so just give me something like a antibiotic, because most likely it would be like a bacteria, not a virus. But she kind of treated me like shit, and I do realize that they do that. Doctors, nurses, practitioners, whatever, they'll do that. They'll treat you like you're less of a person if you look a certain way. If you look homely with a head wrap on your head, then all of a sudden it's, what drugs are you seeking? If I come in looking like this with some, just eyeliner on and maybe a wig, or if I have my hair done or something, then it would be, well, you don't look as bad. At what point does a human being become believable just on their word alone? Why do you have to look apart? And why does taking care of yourself and doing the only thing you can to feel human work against you? I've had Essure out of me. It'll be 5 years in April. I still have issues. I still have back issues. I still have neck issues. I still have PTSD, depression, anxiety, agoraphobia, because I got to a point where I didn't want to be around people, because how do you feel pain in front of people and they not notice? They not see. So it's almost like you want to become invisible. So I have all these issues still. I do still have back pain, neck pain, the herniated bulging disc. I have those things. As far as the Chiari goes, I was told that I still have it, yet I have less issues with the passing out. I don't pass out. I do get migraines, but I don't have the severe pain in the crest of my head in the back. I don't get that anymore. And I believe that a lot of that was because once I had Essure removed from me, its inflammation causing components aren't there. So, yes, my body went through years of damage, so it's not just going to miraculously heal itself. And I am doing everything I can to further heal myself and to continue healing. It just didn't end in one day, but it's like they have never taken accountability or responsibility. You have companies like Bayer who distributed Essure. They offer settlements. The lawyers that work with them talk to you to convince you to take the settlement as if your life wasn't on the line all that time. They say, oh, we fought, but you didn't win. Because at the end of the day, there's no admission of guilt. There's no admission of fault. There's even no apology that, sorry, you almost died from a product that we had your doctor tell you was safe. I never should have been referred to have Essure in me, for the simple fact that one day it was going to have to be removed. Even the possibility of having it removed was more dangerous than just getting my tubes tied. Yet, a measly settlement I'm being told by a lawyer that I should have taken because something's better than nothing. What about my kids? Were you thinking about my kids when I had to go through 7 years of not having, not losing a job, not knowing where my future was, preparing myself for death? What about my children then? Please, as far as the lawyer goes, you can go the same place the bear can go. You can go to hell. Because a settlement I'm not taking, because I want people to know that the things that people suffer through at the hands of the medical field, from pharmaceutical companies, the issues that people go through needs to be heard. Needs to be heard. Needs to be known that they will be swept under the rug. That this product had pre-market approval to the point that it was approved upon being a sterilization device that was compared to something else. That's why it was approved, not because it was foolproof safe. They had market research done on that, and the company they bought it from, they ignored that some women were having problems. People need to know that these things happen. You cannot just be trusting of pharmaceutical companies and the doctors that refer these things, because they get stipends from things that they refer you to that you put in your body. Blind trust can not just have you almost losing your life, but there are women who have died from this. And you know what? If not taking a few $1,000s is what I have to do to be able to tell my story and say who is actually responsible, then I will. I will. Because I'd rather do that and one woman, if just one woman finds out and betters her life, gets this out of her because she thinks there's no way that my liver has anything to do with something that's in my uterus or in my fallopian tubes. You know, there's been babies born with coils stuck to their heads and things like that. There's women that have, been told to do this thinking that it was something like an IUD, not that they had a permanent sterilization, who have never had children, who never had the option to have children. These things need to be heard. These things need to be talked about. These things need to be understood, that the Tuskegee experiment isn't just a story of the past. There are women that are being mistreated. There are women who have been tested on, who have suffered from this, and it should be known. And that is why I'm here. Because you don't have to like what I post, it's not for you if you don't. But for those who don't have a voice and those who had to take money to help their families, I've already been humiliated. I've already been insulted. I've already had relationships fall apart because people didn't want to believe me. Because people thought, oh, she's just being a hypochondriac. Oh, she's just, saying something. No, there's proof. There's proof. There's proof. Everything from my medical records to my lawyer's conversations. There's proof that everything I'm saying is the truth. And one thing I refuse to do is to stand in integrity after I've been humiliated and insulted for so long and allow anybody else to be hurt. At least have a fair chance because you heard the truth here. And I shall finish my tea. Thank you.